Welcome to Love Where You Live, a podcast where we have conversations about why it's awesome to live in Boulder County. And today I'm sitting with my friend here, Brian Fuentes. And I'm going to say Fuentes, just like the fountains. This is my guy, Brian. And before I jump into a less than adequate introduction, because I think he'll do a better job giving us the full story, I'm going to say this is a guy who does some amazing, absolutely amazing stuff with architecture, generally speaking. I mean, the broad strokes here, architecture in Boulder County. And I'm just going to give you that teaser because there's so much under the surface there. But he's also an athlete, a husband, a father, and just an all-around great dude. And I'm psyched to have him here. So, Brian, with that, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. This is going to be a lot of fun just to chat. And like I said, have some adult conversation. We have kids. I feel like you never really satiate your need for young kids, at least, for adult, meaningful
adult
interaction.
and it's highly likely we won't be interrupted, which is something I see with kids all the time, getting interrupted.
That's going to be really strange, an hour of non-screaming crises. Yeah. So,
daddy, daddy, daddy.
Yeah.
So, okay, well, and to that end, let's just quickly say, I'll often come to this at some point in a conversation, but I met you because our kids, our boys, Rio and Zane, went to Thorn Nature Preschool together, and we met. That's how we first interacted. Isn't that right?
Yeah, I think so. And that was a really great program. I think one of the unique things about Boulder, or maybe, I don't know, maybe there's other programs elsewhere, but just having the kids romp around outside as they're part of their preschool, I think was pretty fun and awesome. And it made Rio, I think, more robust.
Yes.
In terms of being able to tolerate the cold and stuff like that. So,
sure.
Yeah. So a neat program, and yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So it's funny, and we met there. The kids are together, and you and I I look up. You showed up a lot on a bike, and so my first kind of viewpoint was, oh, this guy's cool. He's you and Megan, your wife, and they roll in on either a cargo bike or biking or Rio's jumping on the bike. You got a van. I'm like, these guys are really Boulder folks. I got to get to know these guys, and we did a little bit of that, but it was also in that weird post-pandemic can't really socialize phase.
Yes, absolutely. Definitely a transition phase from crazy COVID times to back to normal, and then we obviously had the fire in Boulder where we lost our house, so that was a big transition at that same time. But yeah, we came to Boulder. Well, I came to Boulder around 2000. I grew up here, so my grandparents actually met in Lafayette. So I'm kind of a third generation.
Is that right?
Boulder County on my dad's side, and my grandfather came from Mexico.
Okay.
And then my mom's side of the family is a bunch of farmers from Missouri.
Is that right?
And that's where I got my big hands, I guess, was from my mom's farming side.
Okay.
And my parents met in Denver at Cathedral High School, and I went into Green Mountain High School in Lakewood. And I came to Boulder first time, I think, was a minority leadership conference for Baxter Healthcare Corporation at CU. And when I was a sophomore in high school, and I was like, oh, this place is pretty cool. And that was right when I was in high school, and I was too lanky and slow to play good soccer. So I sat the bench, but I went to a soccer tournament in Steamboat, and my dad had rented my sister and I mountain bikes, and this was 91 or something like that. So it was like the kind of the heyday of mountain biking. And I rode this mountain bike, and I was like, this is fun. And I had raced a little BMX as a kid, but like I said, I was kind of tall and lanky for soccer, so I ended up my first mountain bike race at the motocross track, Thunder Valley in Lakewood, and I won that race as a beginner, and I didn't know at the time, but the kid who got second was my friend Jeremy Horgan-Kabelski, who ended up being an 8-time national champion.
I know the name.
So we were childhood rivals racing growing up, and so I got really into mountain biking, and so when I came to Boulder, I knew it was kind of a haven for athletes and endurance athletes especially, and kind of, I think the spiritual side, like people that were really into the environment and being a whole person and, caring for the earth. And, so Boulder always had a kind of a mystical kind of thing for me. And, and then I ended up going to college in Oregon, University of Oregon. And I went there because they had a cycling team. And at the time, I was really into bikes, but I picked it because the cover of their magazine had 16 pictures on the front, their college entrance magazine that was kind of a primer. And one of them had a cycling team. It was like 23 people on the cover with helmets. I was like, oh, this is great. I'll go there and ride bikes in the beautiful trees. And what I didn't realize when I got there was that all the sunny pictures of beautiful green trees only last for the summer. And then like 2 days after they stop giving you a refund on your tuition, it starts raining, and it rains the entire year from there until you get out of school. And then I went to a cycling team meeting, and it was like 3 guys, 2 twins from California, and 1 national team guy that was trained in the Springs. And so it was super small. And I was a mountain biker, and they only raced road bikes. And so I had to learn to ride road bikes in the rain, and it was a little.
It's a little bit different, a little bait and switch. So I just bring that up. One of the things I love it. I kind of put a little bookmark in a few of these things, but you obviously my outline maybe because I sent it to you, but you touched on this. So you grew up in the area, but not Boulder. So was it, what age were you when you started riding bikes? Because I want to get that kind of flavor for you as a kid.
Yeah, I was so probably like 14. I think my friend, his mom worked for Cherry Creek School District, and they had a mountain bike program because it was a pretty wealthy school district. So they were able to, in the summer, so we borrowed some of the mountain bikes in the summer and just rode them a little bit. It was kind of a thing for me because it was a little bit of a technology thing and design, and it was also kind of endurance thing. And it was, what I loved about it was the freedom, I think, of going out by yourself. And I had always played like team sports, basketball or soccer, and which was great. I think it teaches you to be like work with other people. And, but the individual sport, the kind of, the endurance sport, going out into the mountains. And my parents really weren't mountain people. They didn't take me to the mountains. So I'd always just seen them. But I'd never gone there. I mean, we went, I think, once to Dillon, and I caught like a rainbow trout with my dad's boss, and that was my mountain experience until I got into mountain biking. And so, once I was riding Green Mountain as a kid, and my dad had bought me a $400 Specialized rock hopper, which was amazing.
It's a big deal too.
Huge.
That time.
Yeah. And I had my pink checkered Vans on, and I tried to keep up with this guy who was riding like a Bianchi, and it turned out he was the pro Mo Ori who owned Mojo Wheels Bike Shop in Lakewood. And he's like, "Hey, have you ever raced before?" And I caught up to him at the top. And he's like, "Well, you should do a race. I'll come by my shop. I'll give you a jersey and some shoes, and you can come to this race." And so, I was super lucky because I was like the only person I think I know that was sponsored, before I even did a race. But he gave me his shoes from the previous year and a jersey. But I felt like I was the luckiest
Incredible.
kid.
Yeah. At 14.
I think at that point I was 15. Okay. That was probably that was the next year.
Okay, fair.
And so that's when I had started, and it was so big back then. So I went with those guys at the Mojo Wheels Bike Shop. They took me to all the races that year. So I had never been to the places, but it was Durango, Crested Butte, Telluride, Aspen, Steamboat. There was one in Fort Collins, but Monarch Mountain, Del Norte. It was just amazing. So I spent the summer driving around with these bike shop guys, and if my mom knew how they talked, I'm not sure she would have let me totally go with them. But it was really, they were really good role models actually, and just it was all fun, and just we'd camp. You drive to Telluride, just sleep in the town park, and get up in the next morning and race. So
cool.
So it was this amazing kind of mind blowing experience to see the mountains for the first time as a kid, and because I like I said, I had grown up on the Front Range, but I'd never really spent time.
This is your intro, and so tell me the year, Brian. What are we talking about here? Early
this
90s?
Is 94. Yeah, 94, 95.
Yep. Okay,
and then I went to college in 96, and so that was a big transition to architecture school.
So real quick, was it so you're mountain biking, you're seeing Colorado, you're loving it, you're obviously falling in love, you're good at the sport clearly, you're getting somewhere. Was there ever a question, will I leave Colorado for school? Like obviously the Oregon thing sold you, but were there other options?
Yeah, well, I looked at Kansas State. My mom, I knew I wanted to do architecture. And I just really, was kind of a clueless kid, and I wasn't really paying attention. Like I don't know, when you're, maybe some kids.
Yeah. No, not really.
I was a clueless kid, and I just wanted to, have fun with my friends around biking. So it was a totally foreign thing to me. I hadn't really traveled much. I'd really never left home. And so I literally picked the college based on, the picture of the cover of the book. Like it's a real thing. Yeah. And I went there, and Oregon's a great campus. It's beautiful. They have obviously a big track program there, a big endurance program, but the cycling team was small. The architecture program was amazing. It was a humanist-based architecture school, and an environmental-based one, which I didn't really realize that at the time. A lot of the architecture schools around the country, I think, are more, or at least at the time, were more Beaux-Arts based, where it's very artistic-driven, like kind of the Fountainhead idea, where, hey, you're this artist, and maybe 1% of the architects will make it to the top and design art museums and be famous, and and then the rest of you will end up doing like Chick-fil-A's and like bland office buildings and working long hours, but. But, Oregon was really like, hey, the environment matters. And so I made this connection my sophomore year in college. I was like, hey, look, buildings are basically responsible for 50% of the, environmental problem. And I found my life's mission right there. I was like, this is it. And I went to a lecture. There's a book. It was a forest biologist that gave a lecture at the university, and I called my mom. I was like, I got to buy this guy's book, So I bought this book, and that was just a total transition for me. But
that's incredible. So you knew, when you left for school, how early did you know you wanted to be an architect? When did that?
I mean, since I was a kid, I like my son Rio now, we play a lot of Legos. That's basically all we do at home.
Yeah.
And he's way more into it than me. I ever was. I was like, you got to back it off a little bit. We should probably do something else.
Something else out there.
But yeah, I always knew it, but I had no idea what an architect did or was. Right, and junior high, I went to day on the job. We had with my friend's dad I played soccer with. He was an architect. And he took me to his office, and it was all these blueprints, and they smelled like ammonia, and it was like hieroglyphics. I couldn't read anything, I didn't understand, and they took me in a glass elevator to a hotel he designed, and it was all just like, well, I have no idea what's going on. And then I went to school, and I couldn't draw because I'd never really drawn anything like by hand, right?
Okay.
And it was right at the transition where computers were just taking off, and at the same time, I had a little computer experience, but like, I was staying up all night trying to do computer renderings. I couldn't draw. I was in this liberal arts program called the Robert D. Clark Honors College and it's how I got a scholarship. I could afford to go there. But they were like, yeah, you're not that really good at writing, but you're in architecture school, so you must be able to draw. And then the architecture people were like, well, you're not really that good at drawing, but you're in the honors college, so you must be able to write. And so my freshman year, and then I got mono, and I had a knee injury, and I couldn't ride. And so freshman year was brutal. I mean, I barely survived it. But by sophomore and junior year, I kind of figured out the architecture thing, and I was passionate about the environmental thing. I grew up, I didn't really understand anything about energy or the environment,
right. Okay.
and so I really made the connection to Oregon. And then when I graduated, I came back and worked in Denver for a firm that was just doing public schools, government office buildings. We did a couple houses a year, but I knew I wanted to do environmental architecture. And there was an engineer in Boulder named Jeff Rupert, and he was doing these straw bale houses that were solar powered.
Right.
And it was a company that was in the Boulder in the 90s called Straw Crafters, and that kind of fell apart. And he had created kind of a phoenix from the ashes company called Odyssey. And so it was me and a bunch of other 20-year-old dreamer environmentalist kids working for him doing straw bale construction. So we'd go out to Elizabeth, Colorado, I don't know, January. It was like minus 10. Yeah. And we'd be out there like tying straw bales with freezing fingers and like spraying mud on the walls. But we believed we were, on this environmental mission to save the world. And so, as I learned more about stuff, I started realizing that, straw bale was one part of the equation. But, and this is, before green building was a thing.
Right.
But in Boulder, there was a lot of people building these things in the mountains that were really into the environmental thing. Okay. And they were, this is the people I moved to Boulder for originally. Sure. It was kind of this, I say this with love, like kind of hippies, right? They're like, they live in, simply and in the mountains, and they thought, I'm living with nature or whatever. And obviously now, the environmental conversation's gotten a lot bigger. It's gotten, it's written into the building codes. It's gotten greenwashed in a lot of ways, but it's become a national conversation. It's become a big conversation. But that's really what drove me to Boulder was to do that as well. And then I had this thing, because I went to Oregon, I didn't really come to CU like Jeremy did and ride bikes full time. I wanted to come back and try to be a pro bike racer again,
I love
a mountain biker. And because I had ridden through college, I had raced enough that I was like, okay, but I hadn't put in the hours like he had, and completely dedicated my life to it.
Stopped,
He never stopped. And he just, right through college, he was going. And I really, architecture school hit me hard, and I couldn't do what he did in school. But I tried to make a comeback. When I got back, I met this guy, Walt. And Walt was building steel frames in his garage. Well, he learned from another friend of mine, JP, who I designed their house at 6th and Evergreen.
Okay.
And basically, he was a welder for Dean bicycles.
Yes.
And he had my buddies I went to high school with, played soccer with in high school. They had gone to CU. They were painting houses in the summer to make money. They realized these general contractors were making a lot of money doing houses.
For sure.
So they all maxed their credit cards, bought a house on Grape, stuccoed it, redid the kitchen, sold it, made like $60,000, and then bought another house. And they had a buddy from California. They had a little money, so they started to invest. So I did a bunch of speculative houses for them when I first came back to Boulder. And so that was more. It wasn't what I was, it it wasn't environmental so much,
sure.
but I was also learning the business and the speed
great.
and
That's
how to
great.
work with the city of Boulder. And it was all mostly city of Boulder work. And so we did a whole bunch of houses. And I think I was also learning what the market would take and tolerate in terms of aesthetics and size and configuration and style and that sort of thing.
And so now we're probably late 90s, early 2000?
Yeah, we're 2000s. Yeah, so 2000. So I came back up here. I worked for just a couple years in Denver, kind of bounced back and forth between living with my parents and my grandmother in Denver. And then I just bought a condo up here on the hill. And I was like, I'm doing this. I'm going to go off on my own and just start doing houses. So I quit my first job for, a $3,000 architecture commission. I could pay my mortgage for like 1 month. It was like the stupidest thing. I had no savings. I mean, maybe I had like $5,000 in the bank or something. But I mean, I essentially had like 2 months of living expenses in the bank, and I was clueless. But I was like, I'm going to make this thing work.
I love that.
And so I was working with Jeff Rupert doing the straw bale stuff for him. I was basically doing engineering, drafting, construction, labor, and then I was also still designing houses for my friends.
Right.
So it was kind of a mishmash of just self-employment opportunities.
But you're making it work, and you're chiseling out the ability and the tools to make the dream, which is still there. It's still your driver, is that environmental focus, architecture, and you learn how to draw at some point.
And finally, luckily the computer, that's how I got my first job. I was good at the computer. So they were like, oh, you're good at the computer. You can do these renderings. And so, so I ended up meeting JP, the bike welder, and Julie, his wife, and they, because I did their house for so cheap, they let me do this house in 6th and Evergreen. So I did that, for a very low fee, but it got on the Green Home Tour.
Oh, nice.
And then I'd had a house in the Boulder Green Home Tour for every year, pretty much until a couple of years ago. I think we kind of trailed off, just lost a little bit of interest in COVID and everything. But that really kind of launched me into that. And then I just kept every year trying to do more progressive projects. But their house was a straw bale passive solar project. That was, pretty unique at the time. Concrete floors and pretty modern, and different from a lot of the other stuff. And so we just kept doing projects that were trying to be more and more progressive.
Right. Okay, so this is awesome. How now you're back in Boulder, you're doing this, you shared the kind of career dream, you're riding your bike a bunch. So you're getting out and enjoying outdoors now?
Yes,
really
yes. I think that was the thing when I first came back from college, I was, the typical architect, you go sit in the office for 10 hours a day and they work you for $30,000 a year, and you just, it's like it's a hazing kind of thing. And, some people make it, some people don't. And what I realized is like, hey, if I go work for these guys in Boulder, my friends, and work for Jeff, I can make a little bit of money, I can pay my mortgage, and then I can work at night in the mornings, but I can go out and ride for a couple hours a day.
Perfect.
And I have my freedom back. So it was a dream. I couldn't believe. I felt like I had, and now I think in this day and age of everyone's got some sort of online internet business or thing going. I didn't realize that was an option. You grew up in the suburbs, and my parents went to work
9 to 5 or
9 to 5, and that's your life. That's what
100%.
what adults do. And then the kids stay home and they get bored in the suburbs and they go crazy or whatever, like we did. But I saw this whole new life in Boulder, and I realized there was entrepreneurs and there was money that I had never seen growing up in a middle-class suburb.
Right.
And that there was all this opportunity. And there was a real interest in environmental architecture. So it was a really special place for me.
Perfect.
Because there were people that were interested in this thing. And a lot of people, even, I had one client who, his family, their money came from oil. But he was like, I want to build a solar-powered straw bale house. So we did one, right in Newlands in Boulder. That was that was like 2006 or 2007. And so by that point I was established enough that where I could start riding a little bit more again. My business had been established. I wasn't just surviving
paycheck
month to month when I first came here. But I think that was the pretty awesome time. Like I said, there's a bunch of guys, mostly guys, some girls, but the construction industry generally, that were really trying to do cool things.
I love that.
And so my friend, he started a plaster company. And he now sells the lime-based plasters nationally. Okay. And he was doing drywall plastering and straw bale plastering back then. And so now he's really kind of revolutionized this direct-to-consumer plaster product, which is really exciting. And some of my other friends got real big into the solar industry, and So it's neat to have been in it for 25 years and seen the
25
evolution
years now.
of green building. Yeah, yeah.
Well, now you have more peers. I mean, it's certainly, like you said, it's been greenwashed. Let's talk a little bit about, okay, so, and we're going to come back to this because there's so much I want to hear with regard to that. You've got this condo. Where's the condo? You still own it? You sell that one?
I sold it so we ended up, I bought a house in 2004. This is right when I was getting back into bikes. I had kind of like given up. I was like, okay, I'm an adult. I taught at CU in the architecture school for a couple of years. And I was like, I'm going to buy a house. I'm going to build a house. I'm old now. I'm 26 or something.
Yeah, you're big. Big responsibility.
I got to settle down. I got to settle down. And then that's right when I met Walt, and I started riding again. And the thing about Walt was he was a bike racer, but he wasn't the kind of I don't know. Not to hate on some bike racers, but a lot of it's times it's elitist or it's like it's very like extreme or whatever. And Walt was like. He was an old rock climber from New Mexico. He didn't shave his legs. He ate poorly. He was a vegetarian, but he was kind to everybody. He didn't really care, but he was an amazing climber. I mean, he one of the top guys in the state when he was healthy.
Right.
But he loved bikes and just being goofy, and he was kind of a weirdo, and I loved him. And I was like, this is. So we started a team.
Okay.
So and it was a bunch of his CU buddies that I was training with and riding with to some degree. And it almost started like sort of as a joke at the beginning. We're like, we're going to make our own team. We get some jerseys, and then but we like when in our heyday, I feel like we were giving the Trek regional team a run for their money. We were probably one of the basically a top local team, for a couple of years.
What's your team called?
It was Waltworks Fuentes design.
Yeah.
So I was riding off some of the bike sponsorship portion. We were doing clothing and Walt was building all the frames, and so he was growing his business as a bike builder. And so it was kind of a neat. It was kind of like a fun.
And so what's his bike company?
It's Waltworks.
It's Waltworks. Oh my gosh, I love that.
And he builds these custom steel frames. And he was one of the first guys to build a 29er. And I think I was the first guy to race a World Cup on a 29er in 2005. I don't know if there's anybody out there that could
verify that.
Maybe, yeah.
Google it. That's amazing.
But Angel Fire, New Mexico. I think I was the first person to ride a 29er in World Cup. So. We were just goofing off and just riding in the mountains and having fun. I mean, Boulder's got all these great roads, and this is pre-gravel bikes, so we were just going out on these dirt roads, and nobody was out there back then. It was the roadies, but we were just on our steel hardtails and exploring trails in Netherlands, and I thought it was pretty awesome. I mean, it was a good time.
Amazing.
Yeah.
See, this is cool, and so you're. I want to kind of jump over to. Where you got to Marshall, because I know you had that property early. I remember you telling me you bought this way early, some property Marshall.
Yeah, sorry. So I didn't tell you. So I bought the house in 2004. So basically I was like, okay, I gotta buy a house, but I ended up renting it out for a while because when I met Walt, I kind of went back to riding, and I was like, I'm not going to really live there. I'm gonna stay in my condo, rent it out, and I'll deal with it later. But I found this property riding with Walt. It was just kind of the sun was magical out there, and it was a little acre property right in the edge of town, right outside of town, but it was just something about it. So it's a stunning open space view. So it basically looks out to Marshall Mesa. Yep. And this, I think, was before Marshall Mesa was a trail system.
Okay.
But just growing up on the Front Range, my bedroom faced south as a kid, and I was like, that view of the mountains, that cascading view to the south of the mountains. Yeah. And it was a cheap property. It was all I could afford. And like my mortgage broker, I won't name him, but he's a big name developer in Boulder now. But I remember when he asked me to get my loan, he's like, well, how much do you make a month? And I told him, and he kind of looked at me and shook his pencil, and he's like, well, how much do you make in a good month? And I was like, well, 1 month I made this. And he's like, okay. And he wrote that down, and that's how I got my loan for my house.
I was at a closing, Brian, 2 days ago, and we were talking about this in 2004, 5, and 6. It doesn't matter if you were the best lender in town, the worst, everybody was doing that. That's how you got loans.
Right.
Here's what I can pay. Here's the thing. I'm alive. Here's the loan. Right. So,
yes. I know that era has changed now.
It has changed dramatically.
After the whole recession. But at the time, I mean, it was a neat thing. So magical property. It was in an old coal mining town. It's about an acre, like I said. And so eventually, after I met Megan racing in 2008, and I had kind of gotten to the point, I was like 29. I was like, all these guys are in their 20s now. And and I bought this property. I should probably deal with it. And I had a big job in Denver. I was designing a house in the DU neighborhood for a big commercial developer, and really cool house. And I was like, I just want to focus on my work a little bit. I'd ridden some bikes, but it's time to get back to work. And so anyway, Megan and I met, and we started making plans to kind of work on this house. And I wanted to build a house that really matched my values. So we built a little 2,000 square foot straw bale house, all solar powered. We drove our electric cars for free, so no utility bill. I paid $5 a month for utilities, which was just the connection fee to Excel.
What year? What year are we now?
This is like 2010, basically.
Okay.
I was pretty much retired. Like my big last year racing was like 2008. And in 2009, I kind of had a feeble thing, but I was like, I'm really done.
You're done.
I didn't want to put in time, the hours to do it. And we started. So we literally got the permit and went out there and started building it. But yeah, it was, and the passive house movement had just kind of started. So I was the first passive house consultant certified in Colorado, and basically it's a German energy standard.
Okay.
And it's essentially roughly 10 times more efficient than like your code minimum house from 2006 or something like that.
So educate us. What does it mean? What does that exactly mean, passive house
So
solar?
the Germans, so in the 80s, we did passive solar in the United States. And it was like, you can imagine some of these bad experiments that people did, like way too much glass. They would get super hot during the day, really cold at night.
Sure.
They'd put a ton of the black painted barrels in the living room or whatever, the trom walls, all these funky things people were trying to use the sun to save energy. But at the same time, that movement was going on in Urbana-Champaign area in Illinois. You had the super insulation movement. And it was actually there was a Montana super insulation product where the government actually supported this 12-inch double stud wall houses that were being built in the 70s. And so there were kind of two competing movements, the passive solar movement and the super insulation movement. And when we had cheap energy in the 80s and 90s, all the houses got bigger in the U.S. The kind of interest after the 70s when, this all went away in terms of we had the oil and gas crisis, and then that went away, and then it was like cheap energy again in the U.S., the passive solar movement in the U.S. kind of died.
Yeah.
But in Germany, they kept going. But the Germans, just how they did it, they were like, oh yeah, passive solar, but they called it passive house.
Okay.
And so what happened was Darmstadt University, Wolfgang Feist, and Bo Adamson, a Swedish professor, basically they built an Excel spreadsheet that was they calculated every bit of energy that a house used, from the lights, the toilets flushing, whatever. And it was a university project, and it still exists today, that spreadsheet.
Okay.
They've tried to make it easier to use, but essentially it's still a really dorky academic product.
Gotcha.
But the essential goal is that in Central Europe, where you have you don't have the solar radiation you have in Boulder, Colorado, or in Colorado in general, so they don't get as much sun, but it's also a little more temperate climate.
Gotcha.
But they don't have a heating system in these houses. So what's really important to understand is a lot of these big apartment buildings in Europe, they're masonry.
Okay.
And so they're trying to figure out a way to take these buildings off of gas with all their radiant baseboards and make them energy efficient. So what they would do is they'd wrap these buildings essentially in 12 inches of styrofoam.
Okay.
They'd put in triple pane windows in the styrofoam layer. And so they encapsulate all that mass on the inside. They would put in a ventilation system that recovered 90% of the heat. So it'd give you fresh air to the bedrooms, fresh air to the living spaces all the time. And they would extract the air from the bathrooms and kitchens, and they would just exchange the heat. So they get rid of the dirty air in your house. It's like a bath fan, but it's got a heat recovery unit. So it's got a little heat exchanger on it. And now those are required in Boulder, right? That's kind of a common thing everyone's putting when they new houses. But at the time, this is a device that didn't really exist, right? But they were able to do that, and they were able to do that at cheaper than the cost of repairing these dying baseboard radiant systems, because the plumbing systems in these old buildings are so expensive to fix, because it's just a ton of copper. It's a ton of, so when these plumbing systems were dying, they could come in and they could renovate these buildings. And so that was the idea. It was carbon neutrality cost effectively. So they were trying to figure out a way to build an all electric building, save at the same cost of just repairing these buildings that were, 200 years old and failing with these old radiators. So the idea was really rooted in that, but it was this idea that you didn't have a heating system. So that's where the passive house comes in. There's no active heating system, even though in reality, in the colder climates like Colorado, we have a bigger swing. So you do need a small heating system. But we've done houses that are 2,000, 2,500 square feet with just one mini split heat pump that costs $3,000 to install or $4,000 to install.
Wow.
So in our house that we just renovated in South Boulder, same thing. We cooled it this summer with one 9 kV2 mini split that was $4,000. And we haven't turned on the heat this year in our house. It's just been the sun and the 16 inches of insulation. So our walls are 16 inches thick. My roof is 2 feet thick.
Wow.
I put 12 inches of foam around my foundation. I put 12 inches of foam under my slab. So the whole thing is isolated from the ground.
Amazing.
And when the sun comes in these windows from Germany, it has a 50% solar heat gain coefficient. So that means 50% of the heat comes through the windows compared to 30% from a normal window. And then because they're triple pane, they're R10. So they're better than most people's 2x4 walls with insulation in terms of insulation. So it's just the greenhouse effect, right? It's just the sun heats your house. So that's that in. And when I had done a bunch of straw bale homes in the 2000s, and then when I read about Passive House, when I went to the first training, I was like, this is it.
That's the one.
This is it. Because what I had been doing was these houses that had really expensive mechanical systems. It was like $100,000 mechanical systems. And I was like, oh, this is like crazy. I'm doing all this extra insulation. I'm doing pretty good windows, but I wasn't going to the Passive House level. And that's what enabled us to take that money out of the mechanical system, put it into the insulation. It's just like when you go to the store, and if you go to the baseball game and you wear a little, sweatshirt, you're going to have to go buy like 15 hot chocolates to stay warm for that whole baseball game. Or you could bring your North Face, Uber puffy jacket, and you sit there and you don't do anything.
Yeah.
And your body heat just stays in the jacket because it's continuous insulation. There's no gaps, there's no holes, there's no leaks. And you just stay warm.
That's a wonderful analogy.
Yeah. So it's basic science, but nobody does it because the building industry has just been using 2x4s or 2x6s for 30 years and so resistant to change.
Right. And so you started doing that, and that's your primary focus. Most people hire you. That's what they want to see.
That's from 2009 and 10. I did a bunch of lectures. It was kind of the recession.
Okay.
So I had gone back and done, and I always joked I was like a cockroach. I was like too small to die. I didn't have some big business, so I just had to have one house.
You just truck it along.
Yeah. I whatever, and I could work construction. I could shoot nails. I could shovel gravel. Whatever.
Yeah.
So. I wasn't going to go get another, desk job again. But so anyway, I had a little extra time, but I went to the Passive House training, and then I started giving these presentations. And then it was some of the there was the 4 Mile fire in Boulder.
Right. Yeah.
And so some of those.
2015?
Yeah. When was that?
Wasn't that later? I'm ahead of myself, but carry on. It doesn't.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I feel like it was earlier because there was the Jamestown fire. Well, the fire in Jamestown. I can't remember the name of that one, but that was more like 2003 or something because I did a couple of those.
Okay.
But there's been multiple fires here now.
Yeah.
So I did a bunch of houses. I think 2010, 11. I don't know. After the 12 maybe it was 12. There were 4 Mile fire rebuilds, and those people had seen me present, and they were like, "I want one of those houses."
Amazing.
And so they were more fire resistant. We were stucco, we were doing straw bale, or we were doing 8-inch thick walls or 12-inch thick walls. So we did a variety of buildings after that, but they all had super thick walls. They all had windows from Europe. I was one of the first people in Boulder, I think, to bring in windows from Europe and start installing them in the houses. And now it's pretty commonplace in the higher end homes in Boulder.
Sure. 100%.
But I realized that the windows were the weak point, and our ventilation system, we had to get a European ventilation system because they just weren't making them here yet, and they're still not really. There's a couple now. But yeah, that was the 2010. So everything we've done the last 15 years has kind of been in this Passive House mentality. And now, what's I think I'm starting to realize with environmentalism is it's really linked to social justice and equity. It's like if we're going to do this and really solve the environmental problem, we got to do it for everybody.
Yeah.
And apartments are more efficient than houses, single family houses. And there's a huge housing crisis. So we just need to build more buildings and have more housing in Boulder. And so the city, I think, has really transitioned a lot and working on that. And they're still allowing housing. And the county, I've been pushing hard a little bit politically to try to make that happen. And now the comprehensive plan is getting rewritten, and I'm hoping that housing is a big part of that because I think if you want good restaurants and you want diversity and you want culture, you got to have more people and you got to have more density to get that, and you got to have more housing options for people.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes, correct. And we're starting to see a few of these little plots of land. They're starting to give way to that. I was just mentioning right here, 28th and J. They just annexed that portion of land into the city.
I didn't know that.
And it just happened, and the developer has been waiting until the city can annex it to bring it in. It's a 5 or 8 acre parcel. It's smaller, but it's where that church is, the city church. You've seen it.
Okay.
And their goal is to put in, I believe it's 84 or 74 homes, and 30% at affordable middle income.
Wow, yeah.
So they've got kind of that middle income, not the affordable. And they've sort of got, but those little projects are going, and it's really fascinating. I think that what they need to do though is they need to have someone like you that says, well, let's build this properly. In the way that you're describing. Yeah.
And I think what's cool is now I think I'm old enough that there are a bunch of my peers that are younger than me now that are starting to do Passive House.
That's great.
And I think, the city codes in Boulder have been fairly progressive. They probably need a rewrite too, because I think there's some contradictions. There's some stuff in there that, green buildings exploded in the last 20 years, and it's such a broad thing. But then the energy side, you have to be really targeted and really understand the science.
Yeah.
But then you've also got to bring in industry people that know how to build buildings and like, what's really practical. Because I think some of the regulations, they push against each other. And so it certainly needs a rewrite. But really hats off to Boulder, the city and the county for doing really progressive. Really challenging, energy codes. Because I think that ultimately it benefits the consumer because you're living in a safer, healthier environment with better air quality and more thermally comfortable.
Gotcha.
So it's a better thing. But if we can do it, all the development on 28th Street with all these apartments and everything, I look at those and I'm like, those buildings could be better. They could be better. I think at the same price point, they could still be 10-20% better.
Yeah.
If they optimized and didn't spend money on certain like architectural features that I'm like, that's not going to look good in 20 years anyway. You might as well just put that into quality.
Well. Yes. Oh, we need to. Yeah. The goal is to get you in front of the right people to talk about that. I think that'd be a good move in the right direction.
Yeah. And I think it's coming. I think this generation. I know what some of the people that have worked for me even in the past or have their own design build firms now, and I see what they're doing. It's great.
It's so cool.
And so it's coming, but it's not coming fast enough. Yeah. Certainly there needs to be more awareness made and just more case studies. Made available.
For sure. Okay, so this is kind of just maybe it's not a nerdy question, but tell me, there's this house, most of my clients live across the street from it. Somebody come to find out, either you told me or I found out that you did this house. It's on Geneva.
Okay, yes.
Up by the Flatiron. And you did, and that house, it just visually, I'm like, this thing's cool. It's got dirt. It's got dirt on the roof.
Right,
It's got a heat pump. I know that. It's got
Yes.
like, I think, tell me a little bit about that house. Like, what makes that house unique? It's just, and I'm talking about, the listeners are saying, what's Geneva? It's just a spot that sits under the Flatiron. It's kind of upper Chautauqua,
Yes.
North of Baseline, kind of a nice little enclave, some cool houses. But tell me about that house.
Yeah, there's a bunch of really beautiful, unique houses in the neighborhood. I love the diversity of architecture in there, and there's some Hartling ones, and which
cool
is,
stuff.
Charles Hartling is one of the older architects in Boulder, originally doing really modern, unique houses in Boulder. So a really beautiful spot. But that house is one of my favorites we've ever done, still aesthetically.
Okay.
But it's basically a board form concrete exterior. And then the other part of it, that's the wood part, is a Costa Rican teak that's sustainably harvested. But we bought an entire container of that teak, and at the time it was like $4 a square foot. I don't even know you can go to Home Depot and get like pine for that now for $4 a square foot. Now I think it's like 12 or something like that. But it was an amazing deal, and the clients were amazing. Actually, it's a good buddy of mine who is who's the owner of that house. Dan and Pam, they're just the sweetest people. And he went to Harvard in astrophysics and did financing. He's a smart guy, but he builds bikes too now.
I think I remember that. Yeah.
And he's also into the bike thing. So he picked me over a more experienced architect in town and really kind of gave me a shot at that one. And that was another breakthrough house for me, for sure.
It's a beautiful house.
And we spent a ton of time on it, just the proportions and the aesthetics. And it was in Modern Denver magazine years ago. But we put a lot of love into that thing.
Yeah.
And it's 10 kilowatts of solar, heat pumps. And we've kind of redone some of the systems now, knowing what we know.
Because when did you do that house? How long?
2009. It's pretty old actually now, but it's still, I go by it and I think it's got a little something. And I know there was a couple knockoffs I saw in town after that. I won't say that they saw my thing, but
they saw your thing. No, it's cool. I mean, I remember it was just one of those moments where I was just getting to know you, and I'm selling this house or helping these guys, and I see this thing, and we started talking about it. It's super cool. I wanted to hear more about it, but.
Yeah, and it was and some of the ideas are not so much about even environmentalism. Like all the bedrooms, like downstairs, open out, have a door to the outside. Nice. And so a lot of the houses we do, this idea of kind of democratic things where you could and it could adapt over time. Like, if you wanted to have a mother-in-law suite or you wanted to turn it into a multifamily building or an ADU, I think it's important for architects to design buildings that like you're looking 50, 100 years in the future, be like, well, hey, this might be a multifamily building at some point. Or, hey, this might be two families living in this house. Or maybe the kids come back from college and they just kind of want their own separate entrance. It could be that simple. Or your mom gets sick, like, mine did, and you need a place for her.
I love that.
So buildings need to be flexible. And so, so it has some of that kind of stuff going on, which is more progressive in terms of like, cool. Just that how we've created buildings or how we think about a house.
So cool. Yeah. So cool. No, thanks for sharing that. I love that. And then, okay, now let's do this because you're sitting here. If you're not watching on video, Brian is kitted out. He rode over here on the mountain bike. He lives in South Boulder. I live in Northeast Boulder. He came over here. I've only had 2 guests, I just counted in my head, that have ridden. Strangely, I have a lot of cyclist friends, but you're one of 2 that's ridden to the podcast.
Yeah.
You have 2 kids. They're in elementary and
Yes, just
school.
elementary, yeah.
And what is it like for a day in the life? You and Megan, your wonderful wife. What do you guys do? What's Boulder like for you guys these days?
Yeah, I mean, I think she came here for the same reason, to kind of ride bikes and to eat healthy food and enjoy the outdoors.
From Wisconsin, right?
Yes, from Wisconsin.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
From cheese curds to here.
Yes, from cheese curds to here. So she was originally in Colorado Springs at the Olympic Training Center because she was a national cyclocross champion years ago in under 23 in collegiate, and then had some leg issues and some issues, and we just got to the age where we're like, you know what, we've done this.
Yeah.
And now you can't do that for forever. So but yeah, I think so. We still do a lot of hiking, and I just feel so lucky and blessed to live in South Boulder because we just walk. In 5 minutes we're out on trails and walking in the mountains, and we can, like I said, I rode my bike here and today because when I first moved to Boulder, I didn't even have a car till I was 25. I didn't have a car when I met Megan.
Me too.
Yeah. So I didn't, probably my training was not as good as it could have been because I was doing the wrong type of riding, but because I had to, I was late to a meeting and I was sprinting when I should have been going slow, or maybe I was going slow when I should have been going harder. But anyway, that's all I had. So, I came here to be like, I'm going to be the guy. And my mom, I had business cards that were printed on old cereal boxes. And my mom's like, that's unprofessional. You're not going to make it doing that. But that was my thing. So people would get it and it would be like, Kellogg's cornflakes on the back or whatever. Totally. So I was like, hey, we're, trying to do something different. I'm going to ride my bike. So we do a lot of, we try to ride our bikes. We try to hike, just be outside really. And it could be anything.
Tell me about those hikes. So you're South Boulder. What's your favorite out the door hike? What are you doing down there?
Okay. This is embarrassing because I don't even know the names of the trails.
Tell me where you get to.
But we just go up, basically behind NCAR. So the National Center for Research. We go there or, there's anybody who knows Boulder, if you haven't looked, there's like a myriad of all interconnected hiking trails that go all over the Flatirons. And if you want to scramble on rocks or you want to hike to the top, you can. Or if you just want to take an easy family hike, you can take a half an hour little walk through the pine trees. So it just kind of varies, whatever. But yeah, riding over here today, I rode the bike path pretty much the whole way on dirt paths, and that's what makes Boulder amazing. Is that you can do that, and that's all done. That was done in like the 80s when they started doing that stuff, and that's what makes it so amazing today. And even now, I think now they need to go even further and like all the electric mobility and e-bikes. Like it's a whole new thing to plan for, and but it's a great way for people. I see people riding e-bikes that probably wouldn't be riding a normal bike.
That's right.
And so it's awesome that I think that those opportunities exist for people. But they're also like, I see some teenagers riding them 30 miles an hour. I'm like, man.
Yeah, there's 2 sides of that. There's sort of those that can. I think you're right. The e-bikes are incredible because they give access to people that wouldn't ride otherwise.
Yes.
Or distances or commutes.
Yes.
But then when it comes to the kids that are capable and are sort of experimenting, it's basically riding a motorcycle.
It's an electric motorcycle. It's an electric motorcycle.
A throttle, and so there's no gas, but it's still a motorcycle. And and I think that could be a whole different conversation on how to get those kids understanding how to use them properly.
The safety. Safety. But yeah, Boulder is incredible for just being able to get access by bicycle.
That's right.
Or walk somewhere.
That's right.
It's having your cake and eat it too. You have services, goods and services, and you have open space, and you have restaurants and density. So it's very.
That's right.
It would be hard for me to move away from the mountains, having grown up next to them.
Yeah.
And then gotten into mountain biking. It would be hard to just go to some big city where I had to drive 45 minutes to get to open space. I just can't imagine that lifestyle.
No, it wouldn't work for you.
Yeah.
So someone comes to visit you and they're coming from somewhere like that, a big city, and you're going to take them out. Where'd you take them mountain biking? Where would be a fun place to say, hey, let's spend a couple hours. We may drive there, but where are you going to ride?
Yeah. Well, and that's a huge can of worms because IMBA's worked so hard to get more mountain bike. There's not that much mountain biking in Boulder.
It's not a lot.
But what I think is really cool is with the advent of gravel bikes and the popularity right now of gravel bikes, it's that Boulder has amazing just gravel riding, dirt riding. Yeah. So you can, and we used to do this even when I raced on the road. We would ride road bikes on gravel with like a 23 tire, which is now like a 40. Something 50
23
something
at like 135, 140
yeah
PSI.
totally dumb.
Horrible.
Yeah, totally
Horrible.
crazy.
Yeah.
But that It depends. Like, I think a really good, if it was somebody I knew from racing that was visiting, I'd probably take them to Netherland, obviously, because that's, 40 minutes away. Yep. You've got real mountain bike trails. You've got some technical stuff, left hand, for if you want more. I'm more of the old school cross country like type. I never really got into the big travel.
Yeah.
A lot of my older friends who switched to enduro all broke their collarbones or their like necks or something.
It seems a lot more likely
yes.
that style of riding.
So I'm more of a 1990s classic cross country guy, which is neat that it's coming back in the high school kids now. The high school cross country mountain biking is really popular, and I think it's a great social outlet for kids. And when I was growing up, there was a handful of us that did it. It was a weirdo sport. No one did this. And now there's, I see the Fairview high school kids go out in Boulder. The Boulder High kids come out to Marshall Mesa.
That's pretty awesome.
And there is hundreds of them. And they have to break them into groups because they'll actually get in trouble if they were all together.
Pack, yeah.
So, but yeah, I bought my house in Marshall to be next to Marshall Mesa. And when I lived there, it was awesome because I could literally I have 20 minutes. I'm going to go do a hot lap.
Right.
And it was like my own private mountain bike park in my backyard. So it's kind of a dorky place, but it also has a huge variety of terrain. You can cruise around in November on the flats when it's sunny and cold, or if it's summertime and it's hot, you can go do a Springbrook loop up, by Eldo Canyon, ride through El Dorado, which is beautiful. So it's actually for a small trail system, it's actually got quite a bit of diversity of terrain.
Agreed.
And so I do a ton of time at Marshall Mesa. If you follow Strava, I'm all over Marshall Mesa, so it's embarrassing how much I ride there. But
it's a beautiful spot. You said it really well too, and you're in such beauty, and you're looking at such beauty.
Yes.
And then you're sort of saying, it's kind of embarrassing because you take it for granted. Because you don't take, you go every time, but you forget how incredible it is.
It really
is.
If
you take an out of towner there, they're like, wait, you can do this every day. And
absolutely. Or if we take a vacation, you go to some other place for a week. Even I come back to Colorado. I go to Marshall Mesa. I'm like, well, look at the Flatirons, man. Look at the Continental Divide. Look at the snow-capped peaks. And I'm out here riding on, flowy single track, and 5 minutes from my door, and I can stop by Super Target or Costco or Whole Foods, and in 2 minutes. But I'm also out here, and there's nothing.
It's pretty incredible. It's pretty incredible. Yep. And you mentioned this, and if it's okay, let's talk just real quickly about the fire, because you said at the outset you lost your home. That home you built on that property, it was one of the casualties, and obviously that was horrible.
Yeah, and it was life-changing for sure, and not to get into the technical, but when we had done the passive house thing, I had done a ton of straw bale houses, and they had all been stucco.
Okay.
And stucco is very fire resistant, and my house may have made it if I had done stucco, but I wanted to do something different on our house because I'd done so many stuccoed straw bale houses. So all the houses I'd done in Boulder County that were, solar panels on the roof, metal roof, stucco, very fire resistant. I actually had one that survived the 4 Mile fire on County Road 83. It blew through the neighborhood. Yeah. Anyway, but ours was wood siding. So we had the straw bale walls. Then we had another 3.5 inches of insulation because I wanted to go crazy on the insulation. And then we had this wood rain screen, which was just recycled pine from Granby. So milled on Highway 93. It's all forest salvage wood they take out of the forest in Granby to reduce fire risk. Saw cut, so it's very low embodied energy, very beautiful, rough sawn, really rough lumber. We cut it into 2-inch boards. People would ride by my house and like, what is that? Are there old pallets? I remember hearing when we were building the house, like someone's like, is that an old abandoned barn? I was like, that's it. I got it.
Totally.
I created the look because it was supposed to be like a little house in the prairie, kind of like a very rustic thing, and so I loved it, and we put so much love into that thing. But the fire, we had no fire hydrants in the area. It's a historic mining town. The fire truck drove by my house. I saw them when they went up to the corner of Highway 93 where the fire started. If they had stopped at the intersection, I think it could have been a different day. If the fire truck had stopped, because the fire was coming down the grass right when they took a left to go put out the fire in the shed on the highway. But if they would have stopped right there and used their 500 gallons, because they only had 500 gallons in the truck, they had to drive to Costco to refill the water every time because there was no fire hydrants in that neighborhood. So it's really an unfortunate thing. But so we in 24 hours we lost everything. We saw the fire. We grabbed our coats, which luckily had our wallets in them. So we had our puffy jackets. We jumped in a Nissan Leaf. We drove away. We had some, like one little Lego car in the in the car.
Yep.
And then next morning, everything we'd ever owned is gone. Every physical thing. Yeah, we had our Nissan Leaf. And so we went to Target. We got toothbrushes and bananas. The next morning, we stayed at my client's house in Geneva, actually. They let us stay in their guest bedroom. They're amazing. And so we stayed there for 7 days. And then we went to a cabin in Chautauqua and stayed because they had a friend that owned a cabin in Chautauqua.
Fantastic.
So they let us stay, and they rotated a lot of fire families through that Chautauqua cabin. Those people did. It was really amazing. They did that. And then we stayed at my employee's rental house in Louisville. Mm-hmm. And then we bought the house in Carnegie. That came on the market, and we jumped on it because it was in our school district.
Yes.
And it was a mid-century place, solid wood roof. It had some cool lines. And we're like, this is it. This is the one. This is artsy. It's kind of funky and cool. It's unique. So we grabbed it. And that was like 6 months later. But yeah, and we're still grappling with how to rebuild out there, and that's a whole nother podcast.
It is. It's a whole nother conversation.
That's a lifetime. But bottom line is we are going to rebuild something, and we're going to try to get permits for that this year, and that it'll be obviously more fire resilient. It's going to be a bomb shelter because there's still no water out there, and they're digging up the coal mines right now. If you've gone up by Marshall Mesa, they've got a giant mining excavator, and they're digging 30 feet down.
And they're going to close that whole trailhead.
Because, they did. Yeah, it's closed, and they've got a little access trail on one side, so you can still access the trail network, but you can literally ride right by the highway and watch them digging it out right now. Like today, we could go out there and check it out.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
But they're digging, Fantastic. Thousands of cubic yards out and putting out the underground coal fires at the second ignition source, right where it started. But that'll give us some more peace.
That will. Well, that gives you that because I think that in the end, when you sit and you know this better than anyone, is you live through something like that. It doesn't. The probability of it happening again doesn't go up because it happened to you once. The equal probability. But it happened once. And so no matter what, the psychology is always going to be there. Like, how do I feel safe? How do I know that I can go back?
Yes.
How do I know? And so that
we told our kids, like, our house will never burn down. Like, that's,
Yeah.
And I was like, and I always thought, these are forest fires. They happen in the mountains. It's forest fire.
Yeah.
It's not a straight land wind, wildfire in the plains, right? It's just grass. It was just grass.
It's ridiculous. I know.
And it was the biggest one in Colorado's history, biggest fire. So I think the city and the county have a lot of resilience work to do in that area, and we haven't really gotten any help out there. But the state of Colorado, the fact that they're spending millions now digging up the burning coal mines, I think the state of Colorado has really stepped up, and they're taking care of the problems. So.
And for the people that haven't heard this, tell us just in a quick summary about what you just said, underground burning fires. Tell us what that means to folks that don't know.
So all these mines, before Boulder existed, there was the town of Marshall, and they were mining coal there. So they were hand digging all these, shallow coal mines. So, 30 feet, 40 feet, 70 feet maybe, but they're right below the surface. Well, what happens is when they finish coal mining, they abandon those mines. The water comes in and fills those mines.
Gotcha.
Because it's a little valley, so all the water would come in. And then as the water levels fluctuate over time and you get air blowing in there, the coal dries out and it spontaneously combusts because it's wet and so it's releasing energy. So these fires have basically been burning for 100 years. Underground. And there's been little smoke. I used to see smoke whiffs coming out and I never thought, I was like, and if you go to the Marshall Mesa trailhead, their whole infographic that the city put up at the trailhead makes it look really cute and fun and like interesting. But I'm like, this is actually sort of terrifying. This still exists.
Right. That's under there. Okay.
But they dug out my neighbor's property. And they completed that remediation. Now they're on the City of Boulder open space trailhead, right where everybody parks, and they're digging that whole thing up. And then the city is going to basically upgrade the trailhead, add some parking, upgrade the facilities there, and hopefully get rid of most of the risk. But
that's right.
But they're gonna basically they're just digging up those voids. Remixing it with the native soils and putting it back. So they're trying to get rid of all the voids and they're mixing the coal back in. So some of it still exists in little pieces, and that's what's still on fire. But they're mixing it in with the clay and the rock, and they're compacting it all back in. So there's no more voids and putting it out basically. But there was 600-degree temperatures coming out of my neighbor's property.
That is unbelievable.
So it was a thing.
It's a real thing. No, for sure. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, I know it's a topic you've had and a discussion you've had probably hundreds of times since, and I appreciate you sharing with us because it's useful, it's informative, it's our community. And I think that if anything, what you mentioned about staying and being invited in, the beauty of that event was the people when we came together to support one another.
Yes.
Because I think that was really a beautiful time.
Yes.
Where we could look around and say, hey, our neighbors are there for us.
Oh, it was amazing. The support. Yeah, it was truly amazing.
Yeah.
I can't thank everybody who helped us.
Yeah.
And because it's truly disorienting. And even though you have the insurance money, I think that first day when it's like, well, I have insurance, but right now I have absolutely nothing, and I don't know if they're going to give me anything or how I'm going to get it.
Yeah.
But hypothetically, I still have something. So as you move forward in the process and you get some money back from the insurance company, it's a little less unsettling, but it's definitely it's a huge distraction for years.
Well, and there were 3 in that little community when we were at Thorne. Teacher Gwen, and then you guys, and then Rachel and Dave. Yeah. So to have 3 people in our little sphere, that all of you lost your homes, and we were all kind of like, wait, really? This was just so. I mean, it was so traumatic for you, and it was so hard to not know what to do. Like, how can we support you guys? And that was just a small sampling, but
and it was 900 buildings or whatever, and I can't remember how many how many displaced families, but it was a big deal.
It was intense.
It was,
It's and here's where we'll go, because I want to kind of curve in now coming out of that, because it was such a it was a powerful share, and it's something that I think we can always look back on and learn from. But what I want to do to close out is go to some just real positive and just some fun stuff here. And this is you as a Boulder County resident for many years now, a couple decades, and you know it very well too. Well, 30 years. I just came back in 95. You said.
Well, and it was like 2000. I graduated.
Okay, 2000. So we'll say 25 years.
25 years.
And so tell us this: if you're going to recommend someone, what you guys may know, maybe you don't go out all the time, but what's a great restaurant you just want everyone to know about? A great restaurant. Give us rapid fire. Great restaurant that you love. A great coffee shop where your kids like to go out to eat. Something that just share like what you really love about that fun side of Boulder culture. Yeah,
I mean, there's so much. It's hard to pick one, but
pick 2.
I will say, I like Oak restaurant,
yes.
and it's just, again, I'm an architect, so some of it's just the building it's in. It's kind of a classic space, big glass. You're on Pearl. It has a very like kind of an old world urban feel to it. So that's one of my favorites. We just went to Stella's, a gift card from a client, and that's kind of a fun thing. That was, really, like I said, I don't get much as an adult right now at this point in my life. So I'm not, you ask a hip single 30-something, this question, but what we really, when we built our house, we went to Southside Walnut Cafe, and it's just a down home, like diner, family restaurant in South Boulder. So we do a lot of, we did a lot of that we built our house. We would go there for breakfast, and then we'd come back for pie in the afternoon, exhausted from doing construction.
I love that.
But so it was kind of, I've bonded with that place just because of the having gone through a lot.
Of course,
of that.
It was there for you. It was your kitchen.
Yeah, and we have a box car in South Boulder now, a coffee. But the local secret is kind of going to Neptune mountaineering.
Okay.
Which is and they have a coffee shop now. And they also have, Neptune's been there forever. They got bought, transition, but I think the new owners, I don't know who they are, but they've done a great job with the store. I mean, there's just a lot of cool gear for outdoor enthusiasts there. So if you want that like taste of Boulder, you can get your mate or your coffee or whatever, and go peruse the best kind of rock climbing. So it feels very Boulder to me, like old Boulder. Like
go get a mate and a crampon.
Yes, exactly. Very, very
or
old
carabiner.
Old Boulder. Yes. I remember because I did a little addition, a little ADU for like Lynn Hill, the famous rock climber. When I first came to Boulder,
for sure.
And I was like, I can't believe I'm doing this,
cool.
job. So anyway, a little bit of old Boulder, the rock climbers, the
good tips.
Yeah. So
that's good. I know. I actually did grab like an espresso or something there one afternoon. We were shopping, and I popped in there. So they're serving coffee. It's great. Neptune.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Okay, and then here's a fun one, and just send us off with this.
Okay.
So you can pick the day of the week, and it's just you've been given the day. It could be Sunday through Saturday. How's that go? What order? Any day of the week.
Yes.
And it's you, kids, family, alone, whatever it is. Just walk us through like a perfect Boulder County day.
A perfect day.
So start to finish.
Wow. Okay.
Any level of detail you want.
Okay.
I'm buying time for you because it's a loaded question.
That is a loaded question for our family. Well, I'll tell you what we do a lot. I mean, we'll get up and, we probably, make breakfast. We'll sit on our patio, which now has Flatirons view, which I feel very lucky and grateful for. But we'll make our little hippie pancakes that I make, our high protein, high fiber super hippie Boulder pancakes. And then, we'd go hiking probably in South Boulder for a couple hours with the dog. Come back, kids could play outside because obviously we have an amazing climate here in Boulder.
Right.
You can be outside most of the time. Swing seasons, even in December, it's 60 degrees sometimes. Kids playing in the yard, take a little siesta nap, in the PM. And then, I think, in a perfect day, saunter at night, maybe get some dinner somewhere down on Pearl and walk a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm not a big touristy person, but it is cool to be able to have that kind of semi-urban experience with the mountain experience. And my perfect day would probably have a bike ride in it somewhere for me. And my kids are riding a little bit now, which is exciting. And it's a good time to spend time together. But yeah, I mean, pretty much just being outside all the time and
I love that.
is it and making healthy food together. I think there's a bunch of health nuts here, and it goes kind of hand in hand with the environmentalism too, I think. So
totally.
To eat simply and eat healthy. So
100%.
It's really I don't think it's super fancy, but it's really just it is the geography and the being with the other people who enjoy being outside and hopefully are kind and compassionate, people that are trying to do the right thing and make the world a better place in whatever way they can.
Super. No, you know what, Brian? That's perfect. I think your perfect day is spot on. I can see spending a lot of those because it is. That's what Boulder's all about. So, okay. And the true final question is, if I did a very average job and there was something you wanted to talk about and I forgot to bring it up, what would you close out with, if anything? And if the answer is no, then that's fair too. But anything you want to share with the listeners here before we part ways?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing I was thinking about riding over here was just, that Boulder has changed a lot. I think, it's gotten busier.
Yeah.
It's gotten more expensive, which I feel like is a good thing and a bad thing. It's obviously brought in a lot more, I think like the restaurants and the infrastructure, obviously the city of Boulder has done a lot. But yeah, I mentioned this a little bit earlier before, but I really look forward to like a Boulder that is, hopefully more affordable for more people, so that more people can come here and experience it, and live that lifestyle. And then I hope that we could set an example for how you could develop all along the Front Range, because I think from Pueblo to Colorado Springs to Fort Collins, like we're all kind of having these growth pangs, just like California did, with sprawl and and people want to live here because it's a beautiful place. Yep. But it's like, how do you do it elegantly so it doesn't lead to congestion and sprawl and kind of like or So I think there's a way to do it where, it's not just all apartments over here and all houses over here. It's like mixed in. It's got great restaurants and culture and people are mixed together. And it could just be really a lot more interesting, I think, in 20 years or 40 years if we have this vision for the future. So I think that's the thing. I think Boulder could be even better and more amazing than it is if we just imagine, your favorite, big city in the world that you've been to with just amazing culture. I mean, New York City or Paris or whatever, and just put it in Boulder and put that diversity and put that kind of culture in Boulder, or put it in Colorado Springs. And, it could be like that in Colorado. So I think that's cool. Where we could go. And it would make it more beautiful, more interesting, and still have that nature and the open space and that we can all share together. So yeah.
Well, that's a beautiful vision, and I think you're spot on, because pretending that people aren't coming here isn't going to solve the problem. We're coming here. Everyone's moving here, and some grew up here, but others are getting here from other places. And I think that's a great insight that you have, and getting you involved in that, I think, is going to be key too, because you do have, you and your people, because you have great people following behind you, and then great folks that you've followed behind. So I think I'm going to urge you to get in there and help us create that. And I can do my part however possible. But
thank you. Yeah, no, I probably need to. Yeah, my kids get a little older. Maybe I'll have more spare time, and I can do a little more policy advocacy in the community.
Yeah. Oh, you'd be great with it. So, well, awesome, Brian. It's been so fun catching up.
Thank you so much. Super fun just to chat.
Super fun to chat, and I appreciate you being here. And I guess as we close out, I'll say, like I always do, folks, you included, Brian, please, before the next episode, go out there and do something that you love.